Joining me today on another episode of The Gray Area, I am joined by an NBA writer for USA Today, formerly for the Mercury News, covering the Golden State Warriors, and also formerly of the LA Daily News. He covers all things NBA. Mark Medina joining me on The Gray Area today. Mark, how are you?
Hey Kevin, 2020 caveats aside, I'm good. All things considered, and I hope you and yours are hanging in there as well.
I appreciate it. Yeah, trying to do the best that we can in what has been a unique 2020 to say the least, dealing in the middle, obviously, of a pandemic while trying to do this thing we called sports in the middle of it also, and specifically, of course, with the NBA. And for you, I'm sure it has been a busy time with the season literally just ending about a month ago, and now the season about to start again here in less than a month. How has that whirlwind been of covering the league, given the circumstances that the league has been dealing with over the last year plus now?
Yeah, it's just kind of one of those things where it got to the point pretty clearly in this year that nothing was going to be normal, and so anything that happens, it's part of that narrative, and you roll with the punches. I mean, thankfully, all things considered, I'm healthy, I'm working. It's when I'm looking at the league and how quickly it's going to start, you think for the players and also for yourself, yeah, it'd be nice to unwind a little bit. But then I also think, well, it's much better than the alternative. If there wasn't a season at all, there's nothing to write about. So it's been a challenging year, covering a lot of different NBA stories with David Stern's passing, Kobe Bryant's tragedy, the season suspension, then being part of the bubble when it resumed in Florida, and then dealing with just really a frenetic period with the draft and free agency. But again, I'll take it over anything else. And I've just been excited of being able to watch pretty good basketball during the bubble, and I presume even with all the challenges that await all these teams, that the product will still be pretty good next season.
How did you think that the NBA handled the bubble, given the short time frame that it needed to put everything together as from a logistical standpoint, and then being able to execute it with the amount of time that they did, and being able to crown an NBA champion, of course, in the Los Angeles Lakers?
Yeah, I think it's as good as anyone could have hoped for. The most important reason is that there were zero positive cases for players, coaches, staff members, media members. And I know going in the bubble, that was a huge concern for obvious reasons. Is this a safe thing to do? Can they pull it off? Now, looking back, I think if the NBA had a chance to do a mulligan, maybe they would have modified some of the protocols that would have allowed family to come into the bubble a lot earlier, and found even more avenues to help with mental health. They already installed that, with making sure that they had enough time between games, and not only having mental health services, but just having normal activities that can be a release. But I think what everyone has to understand is the physical safety was the number one priority. And when you're opening any sort of Pandora's box with that, of making exceptions here, making exceptions there, that would find a way for the virus to somehow strike. So even if maybe the NBA would have allowed some things with families, I still think objectively it was still the right thing to do, to be as stringent as they could, because you just never know with this virus, as we've seen throughout this country and the world, of just how lethal and unpredictable it can be.
Yeah, and the NBA being able to successfully pull off the bubble in Orlando. And, of course, the NBA champion that was crowned was a team that you're very familiar with, especially being out on the West Coast, and the Los Angeles Lakers. When you think about LeBron James and what he's been able to accomplish in now 17 years in the NBA at the age of 35, will be 36 at the end of the year, what do you make of him as a player and the marvel that he has become, especially having covered the Lakers and seeing now him from afar with covering obviously for USA Today and what he's become as a player?
Well, I think two things jump to mind. One, it's how he's been able to manage this workload at 35 years old, especially when he was a season removed from missing a combined 27 games because he had a left groin injury. So he proved that these early signs of father time, they're going to have to wait a little bit, but he still has some basketball to play. So I think that's a testament of he's really locked in on how to maximize his health and being proactive with all the things that we know are important as far as eating, dieting, sleeping, training. The second thing, when you're looking at his career, the fact that he was able to win a championship with a third different team, it doesn't just illustrate that, look, he has set this trend in the modern NBA of player empowerment and switching teams. But I think there's also something to be said that he was able to do this while handling different set of circumstances. And a lot of times what can be a challenge for NBA players with winning is a lack of continuity. And in LeBron's case, surely it helps that he is one of the most talented players in the world. But when you have a lot of moving parts, new coaches, new teammates, sometimes that can derail the process. And certainly LeBron faced challenges with that. His first year in Miami, his first season back in Cleveland, partly because of that. But he also found a way to accelerate the learning curve, the growing pains as quickly as he can, not just with his own talent, but his will and his influence on the organization. So how this pertains to the Lakers, look, life was made a lot easier for him because he played with a guy named Anthony Davis. But at the same time, I think there's something to be said that he was able to make sure that that dynamic was hitting on all cylinders. There were no ego clashes. And then a lot of new teammates, a new coaching staff, everyone was able to really be on one page pretty quickly, even though there were a lot of new moving pieces. And under the guise of there were a lot of obstacles with a disrupted training camp in China. You have Kobe Bryant's tragedy. You have the pandemic challenges of the season stopping and then it resuming in a bubble. There were a lot of landmines that could have derailed the Lakers, but they were able to keep plowing through them because not only is LeBron really talented, but I think he really set the tone of just buying into what's important, keeping the main thing, and just, being able to handle adversity as you come by relying on your mental toughness to get through it.
LeBron James winning his fourth NBA championship in a 17-year career with a third different team, this time doing it in the confines of Orlando in the bubble, continues to be obviously the most dominant star in the game today. One young man who we intimately cover here in Dallas is Luka Doncic, and drawing those kinds of comparisons to one LeBron James. When you look at Luka Doncic and this Mavericks basketball team, one, what do you think of Luka as a player and how special he has become already as a first-team All-NBA player this past season, and what his future looks like potentially as a Dallas Maverick for years to come?
Well, he's going to be one of the league's premier superstars, and I think he's already become that, but he's not the face of the NBA just yet, just because LeBron's still in the league, but he's going to be that guy. And for someone that doesn't cover the Mavericks on a regular basis, it was really fun to see Luka up close in the bubble. Even though it only lasted one round against the Clippers, there were a lot of moments. Obviously, his game winner in the series was memorable, but just the way that he played through pain, played through his injuries, and just willed his team with his skill set and willed his team through a lot of physical play that a lot of times bordered on dirty with how the Clippers played. For someone who's only in his second year in the league, I had to scratch my head a little bit and think, wow, this is someone that goes through these things when it's their sixth, seventh year in the league and they've mastered it. I think Luka's already figured it out. And there was still a learning curve. Rick Carlisle, the Mavericks coach, talked, especially at the beginning of the series, on how, he was still figuring out how to handle his frustrations appropriately.
Mm-hmm.
They really like that he wears his emotions on his sleeve, and they feel that powers him and inspires the rest of the team. But there was that fine line where sometimes he would get on the officials way too much and it would derail his focus. But I think throughout that series itself, he showed a lot of improvement. And so when the Mavericks got eliminated by the Clippers, there was a feeling that as much as they were disappointed that they lost, they felt like, they're just getting started. But what that means next season, I think that they are obviously going to make the playoffs. They're a team you have to pay attention to in the West, but where does it stack up to the rest of the Western Conference, especially when you account for Kristaps Porzingis is still having his injury issues. I don't fault the Mavericks for not landing like big fish in free agency, but
Mm-hmm.
when you're looking at the rest of the Western Conference, I mean, it's still a bridge to be gapped. But I think as long as you have Luka Doncic, who's going to continue to get better each and every season, you have to think that they're capable of winning a first-round matchup and possibly beyond, because they're one of those teams that could strike lightning in a bottle at some point.
From your vantage point, you mentioned the fact that they did not acquire that third star, if you will, during this particular free agency and trade period. Do you think that is something that is still a possibility for this Mavericks team to do, especially with the rumors of Giannis potentially becoming available, obviously in 2021 if he doesn't sign his max contract with the Milwaukee Bucks? Is that something that's real for Mavs fans to think, well, maybe Giannis could be potentially coming, to the Mavericks?
Honestly, I don't think it's real for Mavs fans, real for Warriors fans, real for Heat fans, but it's not because of any of those organizations and anything wrong with them. I think all of those teams are doing everything within their power to put themselves in a position. But I think at the end of the day, Giannis is going to stay with Milwaukee. Now, does he sign the Supermax right away? Maybe not, but that might just be because, hey, he's going to go through the season and there's really no need for him to do it right away. But I think because of the moves that the Bucks made with getting Drew Holiday, that was a sign that they have a comfort level that Giannis is coming back, because they wouldn't have made that move if it wasn't greenlighted by Giannis, directly or indirectly. And I think that level of aggressiveness is going to continue this season as far as entering the trade deadline, as well as, not just Giannis's mindset, but Mike Budenholzer's mindset from a coaching perspective, his teammates' mindset of, we need to get out of this rut of collapsing the playoffs when the moment matters the most. So to answer your question, I don't think Dallas is getting them, but I think for what they've been, dealing with, I think that they made good free agency moves. I mean, Trey Burke is a rising young talent. It's a good level of commitment. They signed him to a 3-year deal. And, Willie Cauley-Stein, he's not going to move the needle, but he's a serviceable center. He's going to provide reinforcements until Kristaps Porzingis comes back. And, James Johnson is a solid player. So I think obviously the fortunes rely on Luka Doncic, but it's not like he's playing with a bunch of scrubs. He has a lot of serviceable teammates that can provide a specific need with their position. So they're setting themselves up as good as can be in the off chance Giannis leaves, but I don't think that's going to happen. So I think the likely scenario is they're just going to continue to build with Luka, build with Porzingis once he gets healthy. Then it's a matter of finding the right role pieces that complement them the best.
So with that being said, do you think that Luka and Kristaps Porzingis are enough as the top two stars on this team for the Mavericks to build around, and those two be kind of the focal points that would be leading a team to a championship potentially?
Oh, without a doubt. I think, though, that we're just talking short-term versus long-term. Short-term, do I think the Mavericks can win the championship next season? No, but that's because Porzingis has got to get healthy. Luka's going to take another next step. They do have some new pieces. But I think the bigger thing is you have both the LA teams, the Lakers and the Clippers, their championship window still intact. I think an opportunity arose because the Houston Rockets are going to be taking a step back next season. The Golden State Warriors, they're going to be better than they were last year because they had the worst record in the league. But I think before the Klay Thompson injury happened, I thought that they could be in that 3, 4, 5 spot, maybe even a contender. Here, I think at best they're a playoff team. So I think that there's an opportunity when you're looking at after the LA teams. Can they jockey for position against the Denver Nuggets, the Portland Trailblazers, the Utah Jazz? Sure, but I think all those teams also have their own case. So it's just a matter of, health and how the chemistry with all those 4 teams kind of align itself the best.
And you kind of alluded to it. There's been a lot of change in the top of the Western Conference, especially with the Clippers and their coaching change, with Ty Lue taking over, with Doc Rivers departing to go to Philadelphia, Daryl Morey taking over the basketball operations, leaving Houston. What have you made about some of the major shifts in the NBA in terms of a couple of coaches and their new situations, and also some teams like Brooklyn, for example, getting Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving back, and the rumors being that James Harden wants to get out there? What have you made about some of those power moves, if you will, that's kind of shift the dynamic of the NBA a little bit?
Yeah, well, so far, and you know how the NBA is. It can change, but there hasn't been that star player that has fundamentally changed things. But I think every contending team has made moves to try to help bolster themselves. I think the Lakers are still the favorite, and they've assembled a roster that I think is better as roster because it's going to max being healthy. And I think they upgrade their secondary scoring. That's going to relieve pressure off LeBron James, Anthony Davis, especially to open the season, given the tight turnaround. And for some of the defensive struggles that they might experience with letting Dwight Howard and Rajon Rondo and JaVale McGee go, I think at the same time they offset that a lot with having guys like Marc Gasol and Wesley Matthews. So I think the divide between the Lakers and the Clippers have also widened, but I think the Clippers themselves, they've gotten better because Serge Ibaka is a more dependable defender than Montrezl Harrell. I think the troubling sign, though, is that Montrezl Harrell went to the Lakers to make that better. And they lost someone like JaMychal Green. They weren't able to find the kind of wing reinforcements that they had hoped to get during free agency. But I still think that they're number two. I think when you're looking at the East, the Brooklyn Nets, it's not because of anything they did in free agency. It's all because Kevin Durant's going to come back healthy, as well as Kyrie Irving. And Steve Nash, I think, is going to be a really good head coach. I think that you have to put them as one of the contenders. Now, where do they rank compared to Milwaukee and Miami? Right now, I think all those three teams are basically in a tie. And then it's a matter of how do teams like the Toronto Raptors and the Philadelphia 76ers fight for the number two spot. If I had to sift through all those things, I give the edge to the Bucks because I think Giannis, he's going to be back healthy. I think there's going to be adjustments that he makes to his game, the team, his teammates, as well as ongoing moves that the coaching staff makes with their X's and O's, how they use Giannis, and as well as what the front office does. But I think, Miami can certainly have a shot. They've had a lot of continuity. They've mostly kept the same core of players with the exception of Jay Crowder, but they pretty much have the band back together. And then the Brooklyn Nets, they have two star players. Mm-hmm. I think the only question marks with them is Kevin Durant. He's coming off a serious Achilles injury. I have confidence that he's still going to be a really good player. But the reality is, with exception of Dominique Wilkins, no player in NBA history has ever been a better player after they had an Achilles injury. And then I think the chemistry. I think one of the underrated things about Kevin Durant that he didn't get enough credit for in Golden State is he was able to still be Kevin Durant while also being a team guy for the most part with Steph Curry and Klay Thompson, Draymond Green. And when I say for the most part, I don't mean it as far as Kevin being at fault. I meant the dynamic with Golden State and him. But Kyrie Irving, I'm skeptical on. So far, he hasn't had a good track record in Brooklyn and in Boston. So I think that there could be some hiccups with just how do they sort out that chemistry. I think Steve Nash long-term is going to be a great head coach, but what are some of the initial things that maybe might be adjustments? So I think because of that, there might be a handicap for them where the Bucks and the Heat have the advantage.
And it's interesting, and I wanted to ask you because you obviously covered the Golden State Warriors, and you've seen intimately how great this team was in the dynasty that they ultimately became before things started to change. Do you think, based on what you know and how you've covered this team and what has happened to them since then, is there an opportunity for them to reestablish themselves, or at this point, is it time to look at this thing with the Golden State Warriors and say, you know what, the time for them has passed in terms of a serious championship window, given everything that they've gone through over the last couple of years now?
I think they're still a dynasty, but you have to look at it through a different lens. During the championship run, there's a lot of comparisons made to the 90s Bulls. Now I think you need to make the comparisons that they're now the 2000 Spurs, where they're not a championship favorite every season, but since they have Steph Curry and Draymond Green, there's always going to be that chance. I think Klay is going to come back healthy. He's going to be good. But the problem is he just lost 2 years in his prime. But as long as those three players are in their prime and are healthy, they're always going to be in the mix. But it's not going to be like it was, the season before, the 2 seasons before Kevin Durant, and then the 3 seasons that they had, or the 2 seasons that they had them, or 3 seasons that they had them.
Mm-hmm.
It is a different stage, but it's not like they're all of a sudden a lottery team. Last year, they're a lottery team because of a perfect storm of Klay being hurt to open the season, the initial hiccups with Kevin leaving, and then Steph Curry getting hurt 4 games into the year and basically being out for the entire season with the exception of 1 game before the pandemic shut things down. Here, I think Steph's going to be healthy. So with the Warriors this season, I think they're going to be in that 6th, 7th, 8th seed. I don't think they advance past the first round, but next season they could be right back into that mix because Klay will be back.
Before I go back to the Mavericks for just a second, what's the one thing that people may have misunderstood about those Golden State championship teams that from afar we saw how dominant they were? But what's one thing that folks may have missed about how good they actually were, or something that made them click the way that they did?
Well, I think once they got Kevin Durant, there was this narrative that it was inevitable that they were going to win the championship, which, for the most part, that happened. They won 2 out of 3 times with Kevin Durant. But I don't think there was enough appreciation that this very well could have gone sideways if all parties involved weren't about winning and sacrificing with need be. Now, does that mean everything was perfect? No, as everyone saw that last season. There was the incident that Kevin Durant had with Draymond Green. There was this occasional push and pull of, when to allow Kevin Durant to do his thing and shoot in isolation, shoot at a high clip versus, hey, let's pass the ball. Let's get everyone involved. But I think the first 2 years, it was, for the most part, seamless. There have been hiccups now and then when Kevin first joined of, okay, how exactly are the dynamics, but it was an X's and O's adjustment. It wasn't a ego personality adjustment. And then the other issues that they had when they won the title, it was normal for any team that was coming off a championship season of, how do you deal with complacency, avoiding burnout? How do you stay healthy? And so I think when you were looking at those things, I don't think the Warriors got enough credit that the disease of me and the ego clashes didn't happen as frequently as other championship teams have happened. That happened a lot during the Kobe Shaq era with the Lakers. Yeah. That's happened in other times. It's also happened when there's been super teams that have aligned. The chemistry just isn't there. You look at the 03-04 Lakers with Karl Malone and Gary Payton, you think, oh, they're unstoppable. Yeah. Well, not only did health play a factor, but also the chemistry wasn't as great. And here with the Warriors, because of the culture and the star talent and the personalities, they were able to make it look easy, but it wasn't easy because they're battling NBA teams that are trying to get the best of them.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating perspective because we've seen iterations of championship teams go through their ebbs and flows, and it felt like when Kevin Durant joined the Golden State Warriors, it felt like Thanos was like, all right, here we go. We're about to win, NBA championships. But that's fascinating perspective. And as we get ready to close, I wanted to ask you about the Mavericks in terms of their future. Obviously, it appears that their future is bright given what they have with Luka and Kristaps Porzingis and Rick Carlisle continuing to remain the head coach there. Based on what you saw from them in their draft and what they have already constantly constructed, do you believe Rick Carlisle is the right coach for this team continuing to move forward as they go through this youth movement while still growing and becoming a championship contender?
Oh, without a doubt. Frankly, I don't know what a better alternative would be than Rick Carlisle. He's one of the best head coaches in the game, but there's a reason why the Mavericks have kept him for a while. If he was a bad head coach, Mark Cuban would have fired him years ago, but he's one of the best head coaches. I think that he really has a good way of knowing how to maximize role players and putting them in positions to succeed, holding them accountable, as well as handling star players. Now, look, Rick has sometimes been known for, being stubborn with his playbook and clashing every now and then. I mean, he had clashes over the years with Rajon Rondo and sometimes Jason Kidd. But I think for the most part, A, he's usually right, and B, he'll give you the trust once you have it. So I think when you're looking at Luka Doncic, there may have been times early his rookie year where maybe Luka felt like, hey, he's tightening the grip. But I think for the most part, that has helped with good habits, with good play calls, and the more and more that Luka's proven himself, Rick is willing to loosen the reins. So no, I think Rick is the right coach for this team, and he's shown with the organization that he's capable of handling Mavericks teams in different stages, winning championships with them, and also making the best of a tough roster, whether it's injuries or a lack of talent, to prevent them from being, a lottery team. I mean, he's really that good of a coach of knowing how to use the cards and hands that he's dealt.
Last question for you. As Mark Medina looks into his crystal ball for the 2020-2021 NBA season, what does he see as the league continues to overcome the adversity of dealing with the pandemic and now getting ready to start a new season? What do you see in your crystal ball as you preview what will be a new season here in less than a month?
Well, it's going to be another unconventional season because of the pandemic. And I know that there's teams, a handful, are floating out, hey, we'd like to have fans. But I think for the most part, teams aren't going to have fans in the building. If they are, it's going to be pretty minuscule. So you're going to deal with, not having an atmosphere again. And I think that because they're not in the bubble, there's a strong likelihood that teams are going to have to deal with fluid rosters because of positive cases. But I am optimistic that the NBA, for the most part, is going to get through that, because I think the fact that they've been through it with the bubble, where because there were such strict safety protocols, I think a lot of NBA players have gotten used to it. I've gotten used to it, of knowing the importance of doing that. Number one. Number two, they've gotten used to playing with no fans in arenas. So that adjustment, it'll be par for the course. And then I think that because of the fact that there is a positive, that they're not cooped up in a bubble, they're able to be with family, there's a release from work, that'll really help with the mental health aspect of things. And, that was certainly a challenge in the bubble for certain guys, and I don't think it will be as much of a challenge as it is this season. But this is all relatively speaking. It's still not normal, so there's going to be a lot of bumps. There's going to be challenges, but I think the NBA will find a way to navigate it without, it blowing up in their face.
It should be a fascinating 2020-2021 NBA season, just coming off of one that just completed in October, and now the NBA looking to get back on the floor. Mark, where can they find you in terms of your work and your social media, sir?
Yeah, you can find me at Work at USA Today. So if you still want to subscribe and get the physical newspaper, you can do that. It's delivered, every weekday, Monday through Friday. We have a website, usatoday.com. Twitter handle, Mark_Medina. That's MARKG_MEDINA. Instagram is Medina Syracuse, and not so obvious to my alma mater, and that's MEDINA_SYRACUSE.
Syracuse, of course, one of the premier journalism schools in the country. I happen to think that mine is one also. I went to the University of Missouri. So,
that's a pretty cool one as well. You can't go wrong with either.
You can find him on Twitter at MarkG_Medina. He is an NBA writer for USA Today. Good enough to join us on the gray area. His name is Mark Medina. Mark, thank you so much for the time. Sincerely appreciate it. And good luck to you with covering another NBA season that should be full of excitement.
Hey, Kevin, thanks so much for having me on. It was a blast talking hoops with you, and all the best with you this season. It should be a fun one.
Thank you.